Protests today in cities right across Russia. People are calling for the release of Putin critic and opposition leader Alexey Navalny, whose health is deteriorating. He's on a hunger strike in a Russian prison. The protests happened on the same day Vladimir Putin delivered his annual televised address. He warned the West not to cross a red line by encroaching on Russia's security interests. That's how he put it. For more on Russia and Navalny, we've reached Bill Browder. He's campaigned against human rights abuses in Russia for more than a decade, since his friend and lawyer Sergei Magnitsky died in detention in a Moscow prison. Hi, Mr. Browder. Good to have you back on the program. Thank you for making the time.
Great to be here.
I want to start off with Mr. Navalny's condition and just the latest you are hearing. We're reading all sorts of reports about how much it's deteriorated and how hard it is for doctors to even get access to him. What can you tell us about what you know?
Well, what we know is that he's been on a hunger strike for nearly 3 weeks. He's lost more than 50 pounds. He's in an extremely dangerous situation. His potassium levels are above the level at which it's considered critical. His personal doctors who have seen his blood tests have suggested that he could have a heart attack and die at any moment.
And what about the people around him, his advocates or even members of the opposition? We also see an increase lately in Russian authorities targeting them. What do you make of that?
Well, so what's happened is that Putin is desperately afraid of Alexey Navalny and his whole organization. They've labeled his organization an extremist or a terrorist organization, effectively. They've arrested his doctor, who's gone to prison. They've arrested his associates in Moscow as they were going to protest today. This is a full-scale assault on him and everybody close to him. I know a number of his colleagues have fled the country so that they can operate and continue operating safely from outside should things get worse. This is really a desperate situation for Alexey Navalny and those people who are calling for justice in this situation.
And given what you know about what motivates Putin, what is the possibility that things do get worse?
I think that it's almost a certainty that they get worse. Putin has basically given Alexey Navalny a death sentence, and he's carrying it out in slow motion in front of the whole world. And that's what we're seeing right now. And it's quite remarkable and extraordinary that in 2021, this could be happening.
And what is it, from your perspective, about Mr. Navalny that bothers, and that almost seems like a weak word to use, but that bothers Putin so much?
Well, Alexey Navalny started his career and developed his career on the basis of exposing corruption. Corruption is the main thing that Vladimir Putin is involved in. He's stolen, I would guess, in my estimate, $200 billion for himself, and those around him have stolen another $800 billion over the last 20 years. And that money should have gone to the Russian people. And so every Russian knows that they don't get proper medical care. They know that there's no proper schools. They know that there's no people fixing the roads and making the infrastructure work. And that money should be there, but instead it's in private jets and yachts and villas of the top 1,000 people. And that's why Alexey Navalny is so popular, is because he's called that out and he's made that his single overriding issue. And that's what Putin has benefited from, and he feels threatened by that. And if there was a real election, a real democratic election today, Alexey Navalny would be the president of Russia, and that scares Putin more than anything.
You mentioned how Putin is doing what he is doing in front of the entire world while we all watch. And I wanted to get your take on, let's start with the U.S., for example, but sort of the international community. There have been many calls of condemnation, but also, things that don't seem to match up with action on that front. For example, conversations that have taken place between the U.S. president and Putin, readouts that come out after that don't mention Mr. Navalny. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, words mean nothing. Words are totally cheap. Statements of condemnation mean nothing. The only thing Vladimir Putin responds to is real consequences. And the only real consequences he responds to is if somebody puts his money or the money of those close to him at risk. And Alexey Navalny made this very clear before he went back to Russia, which is, don't sanction officials, sanction the oligarchs. And he even provided a list of 35 oligarchs who should be sanctioned if something bad happens to him. The United States, Canada, EU, UK all have that list. And that's what that list is what should be acted on. All these words Pro-con mean nothing. All that means something is hard consequences for Vladimir Putin.
So there are sanctions that have been levied. Should I interpret them as being basically directed to not on that list that you just mentioned?
The sanctions that have been levied so far have been levied against officials.
Right.
And so when you freeze the assets of officials, they don't have the assets. The assets are not in their name. The assets are in the name of Russian oligarchs who are cashiers for Putin and those around him. And that's what Alexey Navalny, he testified to the European Parliament specifically on this issue to say, you've got to go after the oligarchs. And so far, we haven't gone after the oligarchs. And if we did today, it would save Alexey Navalny's life.
Let me ask you to expand on that. Why do you think that would lead to that conclusion?
Well, what happens in Russia is that the oligarchs are holding the money for Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin values money more than anything, more than human life. And so if you sanction the oligarch, you're sanctioning Vladimir Putin's personal money. And that's what he cares about.
Why do you think countries have been hesitant to do so or have not done so yet?
Because they're cowards. At the moment, everybody wants to be seen to be doing something, but doesn't actually want to do anything. Vladimir Putin would get very angry if this were to happen, and he would lash out. But this is the only way. This is the only tool that works, and it's an asymmetric tool. In other words, we can do it, and he can't do it back to us because we don't keep our money in Russia.
What's your message to those who will say, well, if he does lash out, the consequences can be very severe. So we have to walk, a balancing act in this case. What would you say in response to that?
Well, we learned it back in 100 years ago. Appeasement doesn't work. You can't appease a dictator, and he's not going to start a nuclear war over this. He may very well start a war over this, regardless of what we're doing. If you look at it right now, he's building up a massive number of troops on the Ukrainian border, and it's no coincidence that this is happening at the same time as the Navalny stuff is going on. This is a distraction move for sure.
Okay, Mr. Browder, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.